So I am Cindy Tolle with Evergreen Ranching and Livestock and Evergreen Specialty Foods. And I'm an ecologist. I'm also a rancher. I'm also a mother. And I began raising Criollo cattle in 1998 when we purchased a big ranch in the Sierra Madre Mountains of Mexico. And we were Angus and buffalo ranchers in South Dakota, and we wanted something different. So we went down to Mexico and bought this ranch and decided we were going to raise as native a cow as you can get. So not putting all our eggs in one basket, we brought bison down to Mexico. We brought Angus down to, or we bought Angus in Mexico, or Brangus herd actually. And then we started handpicking these criollos that we found very deep in the Copper Canyon. So we built this herd in 1998. And it didn't take long for us to get rid of all of our Angus and Brangus animals and just stay with the criollos because they were so efficient on the land and really awesome conservation cattle. So in 1998, we started our herd and kept growing the animals, and we would export breeding stock to the United States. And we started, I don't know, probably 15 other herds. And during that path, probably in 2000, I met some researchers from the Hornado Experimental Range that were down in Mexico doing a very similar job. And they were taking Criollo cattle from a different area of the Copper Canyon and taking them north to study them at New Mexico State and the Hornado Experimental Range. So that was kind of my start of collaborating with New Mexico State and the Hornado. And it's been a really awesome journey. I am an advisor on the Sustainable Southwest Beef Program, and I am, I think I'm probably the biggest Criollo producer in the Americas, or at least in North America, or one of them. And boy, I'm getting some echo here. Anybody else? Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, you're good.
And so I'm really passionate about large landscape conservation, and I'm really passionate about the Criollo as a really interesting breed. But we all know in order to have large landscape conservation and, to raise an animal, you got to have a market. So I've spent the last probably 7 years developing a market for the Criollo, and I've got a great market. I sell into 10 states. We go ranch to table. We have 4 different hubs. We have one in Arizona. We have a hub in South Dakota. We have a hub in Missouri, and then we still have our home ranch down in Mexico, where we bring a lot of breeding stock still to the United States. And then I'm working on another hub up in the Pacific Northwest. And I sell into 10 states, mostly institutional. And all of our cattle, we use our cattle, but we also source from cattle that are grown on the Audubon Conservation Ranching Program certified lands. And I want to talk about that because one of the reasons that I went with the Audubon Conservation Ranching Program is because it really focuses on grassland birds. And Sky, can I have the next program or next slide? And the Conservation Ranching Program has been around since 2009. Currently, there's over 3 million acres that are protected under the Audubon Conservation Ranching Program. All the cows that are on this program are all grass-fed, grass-finished animals, which is important to me because my clients all demand that. And the sole function is really to protect habitat for grassland birds, which, as most of you probably already know, they're kind of the canary in the coal mine. Grassland birds. Sky, can you pop the next slide in? They're in tremendous decline, greater than 50% in 50 years, which is alarming. And having a ranch in Mexico, I get that because grassland birds leave here and they winter. A lot of them winter down in Mexico and further south. And what happens is the habitat gets fragmented, and all of a sudden there's no grassland birds to come back north to, make more grassland birds. And so all of a sudden we have a significant decline, that and other things, obviously. But fragmentation is a huge issue. So grassland and just large landscape conservation in general is really important to me, and it's important to my customers, and it's really important, I think, in general, to everybody. All right, so next slide, please. So Audubon started this very similar to the RSVP program that we heard about not too long ago. But the idea is the largest protectors of landscapes are generally ranchers, and that's particularly true in Mexico and moderately true in the United States. But the best way to protect the landscape is to develop a market and a reason to keep a large landscape intact and with good stewardship. And most ranchers are really good stewards of the land. And if you give them a reason to keep being good stewards, they're going to be even better stewards. So next slide. As we know, I mean, I'm up in South Dakota, I'm up in the Black Hills, and the model here is the ranchers have calves in February, right, during the height of snow season. And they do that so the calves are old enough to go out onto public lands to graze in June. And then they're old enough to harvest, or not harvest, but to sell into backgrounding systems in October, September, October, and then off they go to the feedlot. So that's a majority of the ranching that happens up in this area. And so one of the things that's really important to me is if we can bring more value to the rancher, whether it's providing a revenue source for open cows or finishing steers on Great Plains grasses, that's a huge value for the ranchers, and then they'll recognize so much more money out of their cow than selling it off as a weaner. And that's kind of one of the models that we really count on. And we work with a huge network of Audubon conservation ranchers, throughout the Great Plains and in the Southwest. And okay, let's maybe the next one. Next slide. But again, oops. There you go. But again, to have this, we need a market. And I sell into institutions, mostly education and healthcare. And my clients demand a green, healthy, grass-fed, grass-finished product. And they look for and expect an Audubon Conservation Ranchers certified label on our meat products that we deliver. Okay, next one. So as we know, along with grassland bird conservation becomes, soil health and wildlife habitat, pollinators, all those things, good soil, carbon sequestration. And Audubon, just like the RSVP program, Audubon monitors all of the ranches for soil carbon, for grassland, grass monitoring, as well as wildlife habitat and grassland birds. So it's a neat program because we can see every year how our landscapes are improving with proper management. Again, there's also tons of training, and I find that the ranchers really enjoy being part of the program, and then they all appreciate having a ready market for their animals. Okay, next slide. So this is the Audubon Seal. It's kind of a silent program that some of you may not have heard of, but it's really with over 3 million acres protected and huge markets in institutional settings, particularly online, and there's other markets as well, but it's a really good program. Okay, next slide. So again, the same standards that all of us have: habitat management, animal health and welfare, and being sustainable. Okay, next one. And one of our sites in Missouri, as we all know, probably just, from reading about biodiversity, the more biodiversity you have, the more diversity you have in populations of wildlife. And in this particular site in Missouri, there's 5 times more bird density, which is really important for these grassland birds. And this is true, everywhere that monitoring is happening. Okay, next slide. So most of our biggest market's institutional, but we also do national online, national retail, regional retail, and local. With our hubs, I own my own processing plant. So we go ranch to table in pretty much every market that we're in. And so what we do in South Dakota, we have a hub in the Black Hills, and that hub serves the region. We have a hub in just outside of Kansas City, and that hub serves that particular region. We have another hub down in Arizona, and that hub serves that region. So we are building a very reliable and sustainable, food resource for our partners in that area that work with us, not only the ranchers, but also our consumers. So next slide. So this is, if you guys want to learn more about I don't know how many ranchers are on here, but if you want to learn more about the Audubon Conservation Ranching Program, that's a good place to start. It's mostly in the Central Flyway, though there is some stuff starting over in the Pacific Northwest in California. There's quite a bit actually, but it's an interesting program. I've enjoyed it. I've had a lot of successes in the last 6 years since I started this program, and a lot of it is based on the collaborations I've had with the Jornada, getting really good research support, extension support, and contributing to education and being part of the research team. That's been awesome. And then also we've been very successful at getting some really good federal grants on our own, particularly through the South Dakota Value Added Ag Center. We got a really great value added ag grant, which has really helped us too, and just getting the word out on criollos and using these as great genetics for an awesome grass-fed, grass-finished product that's really good on the land and very sustainable.